We're live.
Hey, everybody. Don Williams, Sports Recruiting USA, being joined today by Andre Luciano, Reese Canella, Chris Cousins, and Joe Flanagan. So welcome. We are here to answer your questions on our, this is our fourth week in a row, isn't it, guys? We've been at this for a month, answering questions. So our Inside College Soccer Live podcast, presented by Sports Recruiting USA. Week 4. Here we go. Our engineer, Chris Cousins, will be helping us out with some questions.
So yeah, we grabbed some comments out of the Facebook group. Started off a little bit differently today, so we'll see how it goes.
Okay. What's the number one thing you're struggling with on your child's college soccer recruitment journey? Is a question that we put out just generally on our Facebook page. So first question is the struggle is not knowing where to start.
This is pretty common, Don.
Not sure what they're doing. What's that, Chris?
This is pretty common. This is like probably the most common question, like struggle we get.
Where do we start? What do we do? Reese.
Well, I think the fact that, that person's found our group is a great start, because they're obviously trying to educate themselves in some way. And so to find our group through Facebook, they've had to go on maybe a search engine, whatever it might be, to find us. So, it's a good start already. I think, asking around, obviously, asking teammates, asking coaches, making sure you're playing is a good place to start. I always go back to academics, though, figure out what you want to do academically. Where do you want to go to school? What do you want to study? What's your major? Are you undecided? That may open up some more doors for you. And figure out what you want to do academically, and then that's a good place to start, because now you can see, okay, what program what majors do they have, and what division are they, and are they NCAA or NAIA, and just give you some ideas as you go forward.
What would you add to that, Joe?
Obviously some similar stuff, but I would say really prioritize academics and soccer. Obviously we all want a good education and stuff like that, but sometimes your soccer side doesn't match up with your academic side, or vice versa. So you got to be kind of see where you fit in that stuff, in that realm, I think. And also start to, I think, what Reese said about educating yourself. I think there's a lot of information out there through, getting on websites. I've been telling some of the people I'm helping out with their pathway to college to research 2 colleges a month. Just click on their website. I give them 5 or 6 things to look for. Just surf through their websites, academics, soccer, whatever. Check out what they have, their roster, whatever, and just see what's out there. Because I think a lot, the information is there. A lot of the information is there, but you have to do a little research and just start to slowly get yourself through it. And before you know it, after 5-6 months, you've looked at 10 to 15 schools, and you gotta see what's good and what's bad that's out there.
What about you, Andre? What would you add to that?
Know what your end goal is. For me, my end goal, I wanted to go where I could, get the best shot of playing professionally. And so, I was very dead set on certain schools that had a track record with that. Obviously, I had an epiphany when I got to college that, once they had a pass back rule in '92, I wasn't going to be a pro anymore because of my inability to distribute with the left foot as a goalkeeper. But I think that just having a realistic expectation of what you're looking for, like if you're being told by people look, you've got a really good option of, coming here and following a pro path, if that's what you're looking for. And that's probably the third question that I always ask any kid that I work with. I always say hey, what's your end goal? Are you looking to play pro? What are you looking to do? And a majority of the kids say no. And so I'm okay, well then let's open up these other doors. Let's look at these other options for you. And let's look at your academics, what you're looking for. and kind of going from there. But, like, as everybody has said, there's a lot of resources right now online for everybody to look at, and there's a lot of good advice. But, going with somebody that you trust, like really, finding that someone that you trust and you value their opinion, and has some experience in the industry, really goes a long way.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to that. There's two ways to prioritize this. And I always say this is a series of tick boxes for most people. And so what was most important to my son was not where he got his degree from, and even specifically what he got his degree in, because his goal was always to coach in college for a profession. And that's what he's doing at NC State now. So his priorities were different than some of my clients' priorities, which their job is to their goal is to get into engineering, and they want to go to the best engineering schools in the country. And they need to find one of those schools that they can still play soccer at, rather than going to school to play soccer while they still get their degree. I always say that's two ends of the spectrum right there. So what do we got next, Chris? Okay. Also on that same subject.
There's a lot of them on the same subject, Don. So basically, I've just put the comments underneath the same thing. So this is about the parents. It's a little bit of a hot topic, so you can read this out and then go from there.
It's never the parent's journey. The biggest struggle is watching all these parents that think it is. It's ridiculous. They don't realize how much they're actually hurting instead of helping their athlete. We'll start with you this time, Andre. What would you say to that?
Oh man, that is such a difficult one.
Or did they say it all? Did Tony Reif?
I think
said a lot.
I think that I think parents want their kids to succeed in whatever they do, and I think sometimes they don't know when to let the student athlete embark on this journey. Obviously, the parents should be there to help navigate some questions, but ultimately, at the end of the day, they have to have some serious conversations ahead of time with the student athlete and say, hey, what is it that you're looking for? What can we do to help you? And but when it comes to connecting with a college coach and speaking with a college coach, it's really going to be about the student athlete and that college coach developing a relationship in terms of, hey, is this going to be a right fit?
Yeah. What would you add to that, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, similar to what I said before, I think it is the player's journey for sure. I'm a big believer in that. They have to kind of own that. But again, I know as a parent of 4 kids that sometimes you have to navigate them through this a little bit, and you can't expect them to know something when you begin their senior year. All of a sudden the parent says, hey, what are you doing? What's going on? So I think the parents to start asking those questions, sophomore, junior year, just to start getting them on the pathway and making sure you're guiding them in the right direction. So, we're not just, they're not just cramming things down their throat their senior year and all of a sudden everybody's overwhelmed. So I do think that's important to the parent to, push them, because we have to as parents, but at the same time, the kids have to start to really, when they get going, the kids got to own what they want to do. And when they get on those visits, they got to be the main person talking to those coaches and not the parents.
Yeah, I always say as a parent, no person on earth, maybe not even that kid, knows that kid as well as you do. As a parent, you've been with that kid since day one. And part of my job as a parent, I always saw, was to help my child realize who they are and what they can do, and help them, guide them about what rocks their boat, right? So what excited me, the reason that I stayed in school, was because of sports. Why another child stays in school might be because they enjoy schooling, they enjoy the education piece. So every kid's different, and you need to help find what's right for your kid. The other thing I'll always say to parents when I talk to them is, and I always feel silly asking kids at 16, 17, 18, what do you want to do? What do you want to study? Like, I didn't know what I wanted to do till I was 32. Had no idea. So now we're asking, and there's a good chunk of my clients that I deal with that they aren't sure what they want to major in. Well, maybe business, kind of like science. I really don't know. And that's okay. But you understand that attending, I don't know, MIT, right, big technical institute, is, maybe not best if you aren't that thrilled about going into that technical world of engineering. And so sometimes, and this is why I kind of like this junior college path that we have, is because it allows you to grow over 2 years and get that general education out of the way and get exposed to quite a few different courses and teachers and thoughts and philosophies, and in order to allow you time to find yourself. It's the same reason why I like a gap year, Reese. What would you want to add in there, Reese?
Well, typically the parents are the ones, and parent guardians are the ones who are paying. So financially, it's going to be on them, and so it has to be a family journey for me. I agree with the comment in that it should be, it should be the player who kind of spearheads it, but then, you hope that the parent guardians are there to guide them and just help navigate. But yeah, the parents shouldn't be the ones texting, "Hey, do you like my son or daughter? What do you think of them?" Don't be, let that communication happen through the player. But ultimately, it's a family journey, right? It's a big decision for the family. So I think everyone should be involved.
Right. What do we got next,
Don,
Chris?
I had an interesting comment from a parent once. They said, "I feel like I'm failing my kid because they can't get into the school or go play at the school that they want to play at." And I thought that was so revealing that, that a parent felt like they weren't able to give their kid what their kid wanted, and they felt like they were failing their kid. And I just, once I said, "Hey, listen, it's not always going to work out the way you want it to," and that's life, But I think a lot of parents, sometimes struggle with that, and they feel like, "Hey, I'm failing my kid because I want to provide everything that I can for my kid," and it kind of gets in the way of the process and the journey.
Good point. All right. So let's see. All right. The comment is on the same subject: the stupid FAFSA. I was doing taxes for a living while I was trying to figure out how to make soccer full time when my son went to college. And so I was filling out corporate tax returns. I was dealing in IRS code. Nothing has ever made me want to cry more than filling out FAFSA for my son. It's been simplified, folks. You think it's bad now. It was horrible 15, 20 years ago. But it's still bad. It's a lot. Look, you just gotta, I don't know what you guys want to say on this, but you've got to have your tax returns done. You've got to have them ready. You got to have them in front of you. And it's pretty much just answering the questions line by line. So again, FAFSA real quick is the federal government financial aid forms that you have to fill out. It's an agency. You need to fill it out. Then the information goes to, or you can send it to certain schools, and it's accessible by schools as you apply. So schools then can look at your financial situation and they can see, are you getting grant money? Are you getting Pell grants? Are you getting California? We have Cal grants, and other states have various grant monies. Are you eligible for that? So they can work backwards, starting from the cost of attendance all the way down to what dollar amount's going to come out of your pocket. And where that's important to college coaches is, once they know the dollar amount that would be coming out of the family's pocket, they would then be able to figure out, how badly do I want this player, and what's that player worth? What's it going to cost? What would it cost me out of my program money in scholarships to be able to get that player to come here? If the family says our out-of-pocket expenditure cannot exceed, I don't know, $20,000, and then after FAFSA is looked at by the school, it's figured, and after they've taken into account any academic aid that student might be getting, that the out-of-pocket would be $30,000 to go to that school, the coach has to decide, is that $10,000 worth making up the difference, because it's going to cost me a 20% of a scholarship. So that's basically why FAFSA is important. What do you guys want to add to that? Who wants to jump in? What did I miss?
I'll say that our financial aid department at multiple schools that I've been at have always said fill it out regardless of your income, because there is sometimes money that's available that goes unclaimed. And so I would just encourage parents to do it, even though I think I might have commented on this and said it's a necessary evil, because I know financial aid departments at universities have encouraged coaches to say to their players, make sure, recruits, make sure you do it, make sure you get that information down, because it can help you.
Anybody else?
I'll just like to say that I currently have it open in my browser, the FAFSA website. So I know that the pain it can be, it is kind of difficult, but like Don said, it was way, way, way worse 15 years ago, paper edition, and it was getting lost in different piles, and it was crazy. And it's still difficult, and there's still like some things you have to kind of work through. But I know when I was at my previous school, we won 2 national titles, and we had two or three scholarships, and FAFSA helped us out a lot. I'll tell you that much.
So Michelle Rogers, if you're listening, I know your kids, I think, found a college. The financial aid department from that school usually are quite helpful in answering any questions that you don't know about the FAFSA. They're very versed in it. All right.
Don, let me just make sure that it's FAFSA, FAFSA, just for people.
Yeah, she swapped the S and the F.
And it stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid, just in case anyone sees this. And
she was that enraged she couldn't even type it properly.
And Don, also a lot of schools, they it's mandatory for their kids to fill out some in the athletic departments.
I think a lot of schools it is.
Yeah, especially the junior colleges.
Yeah.
And it is open now too.
Yep.
Yes, please. And by the way, you don't fill out your FAFSA forms and you're applying to schools and you get accepted to schools, but your FAFSA filled out yet and they need you to fill it out. It's not an unlimited pot of money. So if you're not filling out your FAFSA, you fill it out now. Don't wait. Fill it out and you can always update it later.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Tracy Moringa, the number one thing she's struggling with on her child's soccer recruitment journey is trying to decide to apply ED to Dream School for a roster spot that might never come. I don't know what ED means.
Early decision?
Early decision. Yeah. So with a lot of the Ivy League schools and some of the higher academic schools, they're asking you to do an early decision. Like I might be a little bit off on this, but like
I think you're right.
Some of the Ivies, if you early decision on some of the schools, and I might be completely way off base, but this is how it was explained earlier.
No, you're right. I think that's what this is.
Is if they commit if they apply early decision and they commit to that school, they might not be able to apply to another school or accept another school.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. So look, this is how it works, folks. There are schools in this country that are heavily impacted and have a very low acceptance rate. Okay. There's schools in this country that have 50, 60, 70% acceptance rates, 100% acceptance rates when you go talk to junior colleges. But there are very high-end academic schools that have very low acceptance rates. That's what they're talking about. They want to know as early, as quickly as possible if you're coming there so they can hold that spot aside. I think that's what we're talking about. So what do? Do we wait? Do we commit to your dream school or wait for a roster spot that's never going to come is the question.
I think for some schools, whether or not you get a roster spot is if you can get in.
That's right.
And I think it depends on the school and the coaching staff.
Yeah.
It looks like we've lost Don.
Yeah, well, I've never worked at a school that has had that standard, but I would assume that some coaches that I've had conversations with that are at elite academic institutions, they will hold roster spots for kids that can get in due to early decisions.
Right.
All right, what do we got next? What's the okay? The number one thing that Jenny Crane Rogers is struggling with for her child on the recruitment journey is knowing if the coach's recruiting will be there if they commit. Will the coach? Yeah. So is the coach recruiting still going to be there? Also trusting that the coaches see the player as a player contending for playing time rather than a filler player. It's important to just observe how the coaches addressed your child's questions. Let the kiddo find their fit. So what are we doing there? Reese, what's your thoughts on that? There's no way to guarantee if the coach is going to be there. Even if the coach says they're going to be there, there's no way to guarantee it, right?
No, there's no way to guarantee. And as an assistant coach, I mean, I was never a head coach like some of you guys, but as an assistant coach, I was head of recruiting, and so I would let them know that if a head coach job comes up or a better assistant coach job that comes up, comes my way possibly, then I'm probably going to be off. And so don't make this decision based on me. Make this decision based on the school, the academics, the program's history. And so I try to, almost give them the sort of the parts of the recruiting journey and the fixed parts of the school that were going to be there regardless if I was there or not. So if they were a top business school, then that most likely that school's going to maintain their status as a top business school. The soccer program's been around for 50 years, and it's probably going to still be around, for the foreseeable future. So you're looking more at those aspects than the coach. Now, obviously, the coach and coaching staff have to sell themselves, and so I know decisions are made off the coaching staff, but it's just never a guarantee. And if you're contending for playing time and you're looking to, get the truth as to where you're going to fit, you have to do some digging yourself. Look at the roster, look at where the players are coming from, look at who's playing in the program, who's starting, who got time. Is this a coach and coaching staff that typically plays the upperclassmen and not the underclassmen? Or do you see a bunch of freshmen on there from last year? So, the questions have to be, you kind of have to read between the lines if you want to find the answers to the questions, I think.
Also got to be some level of trust, huh, Joe? I mean, you're building a relationship with these coaches, and you can kind of tell, huh, Joe? I mean, I think you can kind of tell based on past stability what that coach is probably doing, if they own a home in the area and they're raising their kids in the area, if things are going well at the school for them, if they've been there for a long time versus a coach that's jumped around every couple of years. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. And what Reese said too, he's right that most assistant coaches, are the recruiting coordinator. They're the ones that are going to find kids and reach out and communicate, bring them on campus. But then once you get there, I do think and there is chances that those assistants could be leaving every couple of years or something if they get a better job or whatever. But I know for when I was coaching, like my assistant did a lot of that stuff as well. But when it came down to decision time, I would have a conversation with the kid, the parent, whoever was there, and make sure that we were on the same page. And so it's important that I think the parent maybe tries to have a conversation with that head coach just in case. And like you said too, look at one of the things I've been saying to some of the players I'm working with now is like, look at that website, see the coach. Has he been there for 6, 7, 8, 10 years? Looks like he's been there a long time. And then when you get that visit or that communication with that coach, it's good to have a couple of questions that head coach. I mean, one of the funniest things in one of my first years coaching, the kid asked me, he's like, and it was my second year coaching. And I was like 26 or 27 years old at the time. And the kid asked me, how long are you going to be here? And I was like, what? I didn't even think about it myself. And the kid asked me on like the first time I met him. And so I was like, no, I'm going to be here for a while. Like, I'm not going anywhere. So it was a good question by him. And I do think it's good for a parent to, I've heard a couple horror stories where assistants are doing the recruiting. And then when the kid gets there, that assistant's gone. And now the head coach is like, well, I don't really know you. You were the assistant coach recruit, not mine. And like, I don't think that's a great way to do business. So it's good to have the parent or the kid to have a good conversation with the head coach before they get there.
Yeah, that's a little unhealthy. That's a really good point, because that's a very real thing that does happen from time to time. You ever run into that, Andre? What do you think?
I spent 18 years at the same school as a head coach, and
Right.
I'd have a question asked frequently. And I said, the two things I'll never promise you is playing time and that I'm going to be here for the duration of your stay here as a player, because I can't guarantee you that I'm not going to not wake up tomorrow. Right. And so I couldn't make that promise to them. And then the other thing too, is that, listen, I went through 5 different athletic directors and 4 different presidents at the university that I worked at, and about 7 or 8, senior administrators that oversaw soccer. And a lot of things change in a lot of different ways. A lot of things that are completely out of the control of the coach, completely out of control of the player, completely out of control of the athletic director. And so, my advice is, yes, the coach has a big part of that, has a big influence, but really focus on, hey, is this school a good fit for me academically? Is the location a good fit? Do I like the conference that it's in? Does it fit financially in terms of our family's budget? And then make a decision. And if the coach is there, the coach is there. But you also have to be prepared that if the coach, if the coach leaves, there's like a situation out on the East Coast where a basketball coach got let go about 2 weeks prior to the season, and 7 players entered the transfer portal saying, we're not playing if he's not here. And I don't know if that's a healthy way of going about doing business.
Yeah. I always remember that this is a preparation for life, right? And so a kid gets it ends up being you're an adult, you've graduated, you get a job, and you love the guy who hired you. That person leaves or gets promoted, and somebody else is in charge. You're going to have to learn to deal with new people. It's just part of life and growing up. All right, Chris, what else we got? So the number one thing that Cher Bear is struggling with for her daughter is that her daughter's only a sophomore and has no clue what she'd like to study. So there we go. This is the kid we were just talking about. She knows she wants to be within 2.5 hours of home. So what's that, 125, 130 miles of home. We've been going to watch live soccer games for a program she's interested in to see their styles of play. She's a goalkeeper. So the biggest problem is finding the right fit. Thank goodness she's at 25. Yeah, Cher, she has time. I will say that, well, depending on where you live, I think if you live in the Northeast Atlantic corridor, up in that area, you could find tons of schools within 130 miles of home. But if you live in Reno, Nevada, and you want to stay within 2.5 hours of home, you're talking about 3 schools, 4. So you're not giving yourself a lot of choices. So depending on where you live in the country, that may be a very narrow band, 2.5 hours, 130 miles of home, or it could be more than enough schools to meet your needs, depending on where you live in the country. Yeah? What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, for a sophomore, I think that's a decent starting point. In terms of where the location to me is especially if there's options, like you said, obviously where I live within 2.5 hours, there's hundreds of colleges. So you'd have a lot of options. That's a starting point. And so I think if you look within 2.5 hours where you live and you have two options, it's like good enough or not. But if you have 30 options, okay, now we got to start narrowing it down a little bit and seeing, they've obviously watched a couple of games, stuff like that. So again, location where you live is key to that, but it's a good starting point to me.
Camps are cheap for you too. As a parent, you don't have the flights and the overnights and the hotels and all of that. So you should be able to not have a problem finding your local coaches being able to find a way to get an eye on you too. I guess that's a bonus there, isn't it? Anything you want to add to that, Andre or Reese?
I mean, I'm in Las Vegas. There's one junior college and 2 4-year schools within 2.5 hours from here. So,
right.
That's just like you said, depends on where you live. But I think the other thing too is that she is still a little bit young. Her opinion might change in a year in terms of what she wants to do. And
Good
so
point.
I would say just keep your options open and find some find some things that might interest. And I think that the concept of, do you want to live in an urban area? Do you want to live in more of a college town, a little bit more of a remote area? And then kind of expand the options a little bit based on that. Like, hey, in this radius, this might fit your personality a little bit more. Do you like to snowboard? Do you like to ski? Things like that. I think it kind of fits into that.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. Allow your kid the room to be able to change their mind later on. Encourage them to continue to reassess their feelings as they grow up and get a little more experience. Good point. All right. Kiyomi Murata is struggling with what is the exact timing? When does a player need to register for the NCAA to get an ID number, Reese?
I'll say junior year. It depends on, what their process is, but junior year is fine.
Look, it can be partial too, right, Joe? They can fill it out. They can begin it. They can get an ID number, even if not every bit of we know not all the information is going to be perfect because they're going to ask for your final transcripts, right?
Yeah.
There's things that still have to happen, SAT scores, etc.
It's probably good I would think by the end of your sophomore year to be registered in, because I think it does depend on you. If you want to go on official visits, you got to be, I think, in that system to allow you to get on campus somewhere on an official visit. Say what your eligibility ID number. So I think after your sophomore year, you have 2 years of transcripts. You're now maybe if you're going to a big school, small school, whatever. And again, if you're on that higher end and you start getting recruited your junior year, you want to be in the system.
Yeah. And anything to add to that, Andre? And if not, then what's an official visit? What does that mean?
Well, I will start with, I think end of sophomore year, probably it's a great time to get into the, get your NCAA eligibility center number. And then also to be mindful if you are attending multiple schools during the course of your high school, that the earlier that you can get stuff into their portal to get to have access to that is a big deal, because that does affect things. And then I think the other thing too is, with the official visit, and every level is different, right? So I'll address Division I and everybody else can, assess it. So, beginning, I think is it August 1st? No, what's the date now for Division I? I think it's August 1st, right? For official visits, starting official visits, or is it September 1? I can't remember now offhand, of junior year, right?
Yeah. I think it's think it's August 1st.
August 1st, right? So being able to get in, you're going to have that ID number. And an official visit basically is, where the college pays for your flight, for your housing, for your meals and entertainment. And they can provide, I believe they can, your parents can come in, they can provide housing for your parents, but they can't, they can pay for meals, but they can't pay for their transportation. And an unofficial visit is you incur all the expenses.
There you go. That was a bonus answer to the question there.
I do think just to kind of say what Andre said there, it's if you are going to different schools, it kind of does get a little messy. So you want to get those transcripts from the different schools, and I think as you sophomore year, you get your transcripts in, and then if say you're not taking official visits, then you go into the junior year, you get another that transcript in, and then you got one more transcript, and then your senior year. Because what I was said as a coach especially for soccer as a fall sport, there's not much time between graduation day and our first day of opening for practice. And if you wait till last minute and try to put that stuff in, middle of July or something, you're not going to be ready to play come start day. So it's good to go do as much as you can as you go.
Fantastic.
And the NCAA will evaluate your transcripts and also, clear you as an early, decider in terms of like, hey, you've got an early decision of you're clear to play based on your transcripts if you've hit the core numbers.
Yeah, spot on. All right, what do we got? So what Reed Wallace is struggling with is whether or not to take time to write essays, retake the SAT, and apply to dream schools, where the coach says, let me know when you get into the school or take an offer. I know whichever decision he makes will be the right one, just wish it was over so he could enjoy his senior year. So it sounds to me like we're talking about another high-end academic school. They're going to have essays required. He says retake the SAT, which means his child didn't do so well on it or didn't get the number that they wanted. Look, you can end up getting a 1250, and a lot of parents will go, that's great, I wish my kid had a 1250, but the school requires a 1450 to get in. So that's what we're talking about. And certain coaches at certain schools will say, why don't you apply to the school, then we'll talk soccer. And that happens at a lot of academic schools. It's amazing that while they've promised roster spots to a lot of kids, a lot of the Division III high-end academic schools, the coach they don't know what's going to happen because they haven't seen your end of the junior year transcripts so they can see what classes. There are schools out there that won't even talk to the kids until they see their end of the year junior transcripts. I know you've talked to a lot of quite a few high-end academic schools on behalf of a few of our clients lately, Andre, because we've talked about it. What have these Ivy League coaches and NESCAC coaches, what have they been telling you?
A lot of them have said, I can't really even think about recruiting them unless I know that academically they can get in. And so, they've asked to, can you provide me all of their transcripts? And what they're looking for too is a lot of AP honors classes to see how that's weighted. I know it's test optional right now for a lot of schools, but I think that's going to revert back in 25. I think 23 and 24 are still going to be a test optional scenario. But as Don alluded earlier, the admission numbers have tightened up dramatically in the last year. Dramatically. Some schools that were at 13% admissions have now dropped to about 7% because the number of kids applying to college is getting higher and higher. And so I always think it's a good idea to do whatever you need to get into a school academically, because, whether the perception is that a coach can kind of, flag a kid in, that doesn't happen very often anymore.
Right. I think it has changed. Okay, what else we got? We got some more? All right. Matthew Rayleigh asks, what does the school year encompass for a college soccer player outside of academics? How often do most train? How many days per week, etc.? I'm sure it varies by school, but how many kids do you hear say, I want to play in college? And then when they do, it's crap. Why did I do this? What do you think, Reese?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack. So what I'll do, I'll just speak on behalf of where I was before SRUSA, which was Division 3. So you're starting in August, you're going through till end of October, November, playing wise. Then you have a break, then you'll come back in January, and you'll have to do work with basically voluntary, because you can't be with your coach until March. Get to the spring season, it's a 5-week season. You have, I think you have 15 sessions you're allowed to do in a 5-week period, and you have one game, spring game. So there's a little less soccer in the spring. I think the fall is very similar to the other divisions, but a little bit less in the spring. And then obviously you only have one date where you can play, where I may be stepping on people's toes here, but in the other divisions, you can have 5 dates, or NCAA Division 1, Division 2, you can have 5 dates that you can play on. And so that's Division 3 quickly in a nutshell.
Yeah. Andre, from a Division 1 perspective?
It's a full-time job. It's a full-time job. You got to know that. You got to sacrifice a lot in terms of your weekends, holidays. It's when everybody else is doing something on a Friday night and you can't, or a Thursday night or a Saturday. You have to be fully committed to being a student athlete. And so, like for a Division 1, you get 132 days to practice and play. And so you are basically, out of 365 days, you have 132 days that are committed to your athletics. And that could be anywhere from, 4 hours or less per day. But you miss a lot. And a lot of kids, do stop playing because they feel like they're missing out on a completely different college experience. I think I went to maybe one football game in a span of 4 years as a student athlete, because it wasn't there. We weren't able to. But it's a balance, and you have to be committed to it. And I think that's one of the questions, when you ask about what do I want to do, and when I talk to clients about Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, and NAIA, and if they have certain things that they want to fulfill academically, or maybe they want to do some things like travel, study abroad, I'll tell them, like, look, you maybe need to look at the Division 3 route, because you're going to be a lot more flexible with your times, and your coaches are probably going to be a lot more flexible as well. Whereas a Division 1 coach, I probably was not. I wasn't very flexible in terms of giving that time in the spring.
Yeah. It's Joe, you and I both spent most of our career in the same conference, right? So what was it like for the kids in the spring, in the summer, throughout the year at Dominguez Hills?
Well, I think fall is pretty intense. Obviously, it's a championship season. We would start probably the second, third week of August, and then go, if you went into the playoffs, you go through November basically. And it was 6 days a week. We'd have 1 day off. Sometimes getting into October, I would give them 2 days off, because you're playing 2 days a week and body's starting to break down a little bit. But you're maybe doing some weight stuff in there as well. Winter, we didn't really have anything for them to do. And then spring, we usually had about 10 weeks, I think, in spring. But we only did like 3 days a week. And we did weight room stuff a little bit as well. We didn't totally maximize our hours in the spring. I felt like spring's difficult because it is a time to improve and develop and give some players a chance to play that maybe didn't play as much in the fall. But at the same time, you're not you're not playing for a championship. So the motivation's a little bit different. And so we would give them a little more time in the spring to kind of enjoy things and do whatever they're doing and still train 3 days a week. So there's a little more time in the spring for us. And then summer we give them a summer workout packet and that was basically about it.
Yeah. It's definitely a different intensity. And I saw somebody today was rating the amount of intensity and time spent at all the levels, and they had JC at the bottom. And I said, I don't know. I think you're crazy, because junior college is the only division where weights and soccer is generally a class. So because it's a class, you can train full time, both semesters with your entire team. And then you still get to play your spring games. So the more than Division I, the amount of time that you're allowed to spend at soccer training full time, the most, number one, junior college.
Oh, I will add, Don, I think Andre makes a great point in that it's a full-time job. And for example, you have to look at my career. Our games for conference were Friday and Sunday. And so the NCAA says you have to have 1 day off, right? So our 1 day off was on a Monday. But guess what? On a Monday, we had to go classes. So we never actually had a true day off. My last stint, when I was coaching, we played on a Wednesday and a Saturday. So our day off was Sunday. And then you get back to the office on Monday. So the staff and players had a true day off in Sunday, no class and no athletics. And so it is a full-time job. And then, it's a luck of the draw really of where you go to in terms of what their schedule is. And then that can change during the year and during conference realignments as well. So I think, to sum it up, it's a full-time job. Be ready for that.
All right. I think Matthew really got his money's worth on that question. Great question, Matthew. Appreciate it. What else we got here to Chris before we wrap up? I got a hard out at 5:00 with a meeting. So let's get to the next one. Hi guys, a question from the UK. My daughter Eva will be coming over to the United States fall 23 season as a student athlete. She's a member of the SRUSA family and will be attending the December showcase here in the UK. She's in contact with a number of colleges at the moment and hopefully a few more after the showcase event, but she's unsure what to do. And she's at the point of the process where she would be expected to have made a decision and have made a commitment to her chosen college. Regards, Paul. Not sure exactly what the question is. It sounds like a little frustrated that the daughter hasn't found her home yet for the fall of 23. So what would you were on the women's side for virtually your entire career, Andre. What would you say?
I think a lot of things are going to get sorted out in the next 2 or 3 weeks with coaches. They're going to have their end of the season meetings with their players. They'll figure out who are the players that are going to come back. I mean, we just talked about this earlier, that a lot of kids are entering the transfer portal right now. So a lot of things are opening up at the Division I side. Division II, probably a lot of coaches haven't completed their recruiting. Division III, I'm sure a lot of that is not complete as well. NAIA and junior college. And so I think that the elite programs probably have an idea who they're replacing their players with and have a pretty big pick of who they can choose from. But I would say 80% of all the programs across the country are probably still open to recruiting. So I think the event in maybe it's in, I think the December showcase is maybe in Birmingham. I think that's going to be a good event from coaches to get a live evaluation or through video. And, a lot of coaches are going to have some questions from their teams, in terms of their roster management after the season is complete. And then the other thing too is there's going to be a lot of coaching changes. Last year for Division I, we had 60 coaches, I believe, in women's soccer at the Division I level, change out of 360. That's a sixth of all the coaches. There's a turnover. So there's always room for people to get recruited.
And I don't think that number is going to be any smaller this year. I don't know that it'll be bigger. I think there's a good chance it might be bigger. There are a lot of coaches around the country that are nearing the end of their careers. So making room for younger coaches coming up. There's going to be changes. As always, that's a really good point, Andre. What are your thoughts on a right-footed player saying he's a left back? My son wants to play in college as a left back, and that's where he plays for his club. But it's often told that because he's a right footer, he's best playing at right back. So what do you think about that? Tell you what, guys, I was at you guys know Kevin Grimes? He was at Cal Berkeley for forever and played, I think he played in the Olympics. He was on the under-23 team. And I was taking my A license with him. I was the goalkeeper. We were doing a session. He was my left back. That's where he normally played. And I observed him for 20 minutes, never used his left foot. But holy crud, with the outside of his right, he could bend a ball down that line into that flank with the outside of his right like nobody I had ever seen, hitting 70-yard balls, bending them with the outside of his right. Well, one of his buddies that had played with him in the Olympics said, no, he was always been like that. He doesn't really have a left foot, but he's tremendous at playing the right quality ball in the right place. So that was, I don't know, first senior level experience that I had seen of a left back not having a left foot, but figuring out a solution to it. And I've always said since then, just need to be able to solve the soccer problems and show that you can play. What are your thoughts on that, Joe?
Yeah, I agree. Unless it's a nice bonus to have a left back with a left foot. I think on paper, that's what you want. But if you can play the game and solve problems and defend well and connect out of the back and get forward every once in a while, I mean, you're going to play. So there's on paper, you want a 6'2" striker and a 6'3" goalkeeper. But if you're 5'11" goalkeeper and making saves and organizing your back four, you're going to play, and you're getting shutouts. I mean, I had a situation like that back in the day where I had a good goalkeeper who was taller, but the other guy was smaller, but he organized better, and he became the starting goalkeeper. So everybody's got like their, coaches have their certain things that they like, but if your son's a good left back and he can solve problems there, I think he's going to have opportunities.
Yeah. Okay. What do we got next, Chris? Anything else? A couple tweets that I put out this week.
I thought I was going to get it.
Sorry, Reese.
Tweet of the week.
If we've got time to go through this. We've got a couple of minutes, right?
What's that?
We've got a couple of minutes just to quickly fly through.
We've got a couple of minutes to wrap this up. One of them, college soccer players. Before you decide to transfer, please have an honest talk with your coaches. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable about how you feel. Be open-minded, listen to the response. That's how you'll know if they want you to stay or if it's best to move on. What I mean by that is when we go into meetings with people, just as humans, we often get defensive. We often have our guard up. We're not really willing to listen. We have a preconceived notion of the things we want to say, and we kind of often have a preconceived notion about what they're going to say, and so nothing ever really gets resolved. This is a very high-pressure cooker situation. You're talking about leaving, having to make new friends, establish a new residence, get into new classes, do all of my classes that I've taken. They all going to transfer towards my degree. I've got to rebuild a new relationship with a new coaching staff, new trainers, new teachers, new advisors. Everything's going to start all over again. So don't take it lightly. Listen to your coach. Just because you didn't play this year or didn't play much this year doesn't mean you're not going to play next year. I point back, Joe, Ryan Saylor, right? The kid that was at University of Washington who's playing MLS championship, Chris? I think he got drafted. I don't know if he got drafted or not. I think he's playing USL championship.
And he got drafted.
He got 30 minutes of playing time his first 3 years. and then was
it
on
Inter
the
Miami?
Herman Mack watch list.
It's playing for Inter Miami.
So things can change for you. Be patient. You played ECNL and made a D1 roster, is one I put out today. This is based on actual circumstances that I know that are going on with players. They played ECNL. I'm not picking on ECNL, but it's the highest level of women's soccer in the country, according to most coaches. You played ECNL, you made a D1 roster. You're not quite ready. Things didn't work out, so you redshirt. Your team didn't win much. So in summary, you aren't playing. You're on a bad D1 team. Now you want another D1 opportunity and you expect to play. You need to be realistic. You had your shot. You're likely moving down. What do you think about that, Andre?
I think it kind of goes both ways, right? It goes to the student athlete and also goes to the coaches. I was talking about somebody about this yesterday. I don't think people are as invested in the process, both as a coach and as a player now. There's a lot of, hey, we need an instant result right now. I think coaches have to be a little bit better in their communication with the player and saying, hey, listen, here's a process. This is what's going to happen. This is where I think is going to happen to you. And hopefully you have buy-in from the player, but you also have to have, buy-in in terms of trusting the process and understand that when you're going into a program, there's probably going to be some players that are playing ahead of you that have more experience. And so unless you can come in and flat out just outplay the player in front of you, you're probably going to have to bide your time a little bit. There's not a lot of players that are moving laterally, Division I to Division I, and there's certainly not a lot of players that are going from a mid-major to a Power 5 unless they're a conference player of the year, which means you have to be playing. And so if you're, so there's a lot that goes into this, but I think the narrative of trusting the process, that's kind of been lost a little bit because everybody wants it to happen right here, right now. And if a team struggles, then kids have a tendency to bail a little bit quicker. And you know what? A lot of coaches bail on their kids too. They bring them in for a year and they just say, hey, it's time for you to go. You're not going to play here. And I think that's on a coach, right? And so if they do that, but I think communication is really critical, and you have to understand why you're not playing and what you need to do to get better. And sometimes it's just not your time, right? And some kids are just not patient with that. And I don't know. There's a reason why there's 2,500 kids in the transfer portal at the end of the year, right?
Spot on. All right, folks, we're going to wrap this up. We want to thank you guys for joining us on behalf of Inside College Soccer, Sports Recruiting USA, from Andre, Joe, Chris, Reese, myself. We'll see you guys next week. Keep the questions coming. We're going to come back at least one more week, and then we're going to make a decision whether we're going to do this once a month or so, every other week. We'll figure that part out, but keep the questions coming, please. And maybe we'll delve a little bit deeper into transfer portal and all of that next week, since it's kind of that season, isn't it, guys? Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you guys tuning in.